Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first session in a series of short Q&A focused sessions on security and safety during the current environment with the COVID-19. Our format's going to start with a short 15-minute presentation on business continuity and security, and then we'll go right into live Q&A. We call this series Security Break because we want to keep your business moving with short presentations and actionable information, all in the span of a coffee break. Before we get started, just some technical notes. In your window, you should have seen a poll. We have a current poll just to get us started about your planning efforts. It's anonymous. We'd appreciate you responding. And then some more housekeeping. To the left of polls, you'll see Q&A. We'll be addressing questions at the end. Please add your questions as you think of them. You'll also see a tab for handouts, and we've included a brief handout with a summary guide based on our discussion today. This webinar will be recorded and emailed to everyone. And if you know people who were unable to register, it'll be available on our website. And finally, bandwidth is an issue everywhere lately. I apologize in advance for any issues, but we'll work through them. So you should have a picture of me. This is who I am on your screen. My bio is on the website. I won't besiege you with biographical information today. Again, our goals are to be content-centric and be brief. As a brief qualifier, I've been dealing with safety and security in an operational context for the past years. I'm happy to share specific qualifications if you're interested afterwards. AE Works, employer and sponsor of this series, offers architecture, engineering, construction management, security services, and planning. And I promise that all the marketing is going to do today. So today we'll talk about some immediate operational continuity things that you should examine with your own organization, address if necessary. Then we'll have some security reminders, and we'll take the Q&A. Again, we will spend a significant amount of time on your specific questions, so be free with them. So first of all, we'll start with some operational concerns. Just got a message on my audio is rough. I'm going to switch that up. Please bear with me. This should be an improvement. I apologize if this has caused a change to anybody's audio. I don't want to blow your eardrums out. Some operational concerns. If you still have people traveling to a physical workspace, if this is the situation you're in, remember everything's about preventing the spread of infection. Transportation. So if you're under some kind of stay-at-home order and your physical location is still permitted to be open, your folks really should be driving themselves. At this point, parking and traffic should be no problem, so why would you risk infection on mass transit? That being said, I still do recommend mass transit over taxis and Uber, and simply because mass transit should be getting an enhanced cleaning that's overseen by the local health department, whereas cab companies and ride shares simply aren't set up for that. So you should be doing some kind of screening of any staff that show up. The CDC has a significant amount of information about this on their website, and your screening can range from if your managers really know their staff, they can do a quick look and see if people are healthy, and that might be sufficient. Otherwise, you should do whatever is allowed by your labor agreements, your individual skills and your manager skills, and what resources you have. But the bottom line remains that you need to not have sick people at work, and you need to remove sick people from the workplace. And it's not just a recommendation, it all gets rooted into that OSHA general duty clause. And once that's involved, you definitely don't want an investigation or a complaint after all of this is over. Retail, it's a little bit tougher. I don't believe anybody on the registration list is in that situation. I'm happy to address it in Q&A if you do happen to be. Now is also a very good time to start cross-training your staff, looking at potential sources of temp hires, identifying line staff that can backfill managers. Sooner or later, somebody's going to have to miss work. It's inevitable. Put yourself in a position where you can remain functional through this. Finally, at the bottom of the slide, and this is the true bottom line of it, the best way to keep sick people home is to remove the incentive for them to show up sick. How you go about doing that, I understand, is a difficult business challenge, but it's definitely something you want to keep in mind. The next couple of minutes, we're going to apply to both your physical spaces and if you've switched to a work environment, some of this will definitely apply. It's definitely time to start documenting procedures and processes, especially if you have never done that. Think about all of those functions where you're single-threaded, payroll, timesheet approval, things like that, right? Those functions where it's one employee and you as the boss and you're the whole backup plan, those are the kind of things you want to have that primary staff person write step-by-step instructions. You're not going to have time to do your job and theirs and start trying to figure this stuff out on your own. Percolate all that down through all of your other functions, especially where line managers might be single-threaded, because you're their backup. Remember, again, that you're not going to be as efficient as the primary, so the easier you can make it and the less discovery learning you have to do, the better off you're going to be. Realize that some staff are going to be standoffish about this as well. Some folks, will look at this and they'll see that it's a prelude to layoffs. This isn't about laying anyone off. You have to reassure them. It's about keeping your business running when someone goes out. All right. Everybody's a trooper. They're available 24/7. They'll do everything in their power for the company until it's their kid or their mom that's in the hospital. And then those best intentions, quite rightfully, go right out the window. Their focus is different. Their mind is elsewhere. So it's not about laying off. When I mentioned step-by-step instructions on your slide, you'll see a super simplistic example, but this is the level of detail you want. I can print that picture out, give it to my 10-year-old niece, and she'll figure out how to turn that breaker off with those types of instructions. So you need that for your payroll. You need that for your timesheet approvals. You need that for every little function that's out there that somebody is an expert at that might go down. You need to be prepared to do that. The next slide here, this one's probably a little more applicable to you, and it's an example that we actually use in my company of the step-by-step instructions. One of our project leads actually generated this, and it's to show our clients how to share files on our system. She used yellow highlighter. Since I compressed all the screenshots, I've added the red circles, but just so you can get your attention drawn to it. You can see though, she's taking you step by step through operating that software. She's got, every mouse click is highlighted, and anybody can look at that and figure out how to add the files. You don't, even somebody like me who doesn't normally operate this software, I can read that and figure that out. You want those types of instructions. If anybody's a veteran on this call, they're very similar to the old continuity books we used to have. Moving on. Sorry, a little technical hang up there. The last little bit on continuity here is that you really want to document status of things. Be ready for people who handle things like long-term projects or internal support functions to be unavailable. Again, though, that you might be single-threaded there. So if you have some 6-month design effort that's ongoing and that project lead goes out, you don't want to be hunting through forwarded email to try to piece together the current status. Start collecting regular updates. Keep records for yourself. You should track the schedule and progress of things. All contact info for clients, for project team members, subcontractors. And there should be a record of any due outs and the associated dependencies of those due outs. The more information you can have and have to hand, it improves your situational awareness and puts you in a better spot to pick up in the event somebody has to go out. And the same goes for any kind of support functions, on more the physical side. You don't want a machine to break down or to void a warranty because you missed a periodic service. Be ready for the person that usually handles that to go out. You'll need points of contact, who to call in case certain things happen, instructions for maintenance items you're supposed to do on your own, service schedules, and any known issues that you may have been putting off until the next service. All of those things should be documented and understood by whoever the backup is. And we'll wrap up the content portion with security. And this is the last slide. So if you have questions, now's a good time to submit them. We should be with them or answering them in 5 minutes or less. So if you're going to go into a reduced staffing situation, you're going to have fewer friendly eyes at work that support that natural surveillance. So you might want to look at closing off some entrances, both as a crime prevention measure and to support your screening. The fewer places that you have people going in and out, the fewer screeners you need, the fewer chances there are for other people that don't work for you to walk in and walk out with something. Especially in your front of house spaces and admin spaces, those are more likely to have telework people. They're also the spaces that are more likely to house your sensitive information. So think account numbers, personnel info, client information. Less eyes, there's a better chance for someone to get a hold of that information and use it to perpetrate fraud. So if you're going to reduce the physical presence in those front of house spaces, now's the time to start going through desks, pulling all of that sensitive information together, and securing it somewhere that's not in a desk drawer. Moving on, if you've actually closed your office, we'll start simple, right? Did you unplug everything? Both as just a money-saving measure, but also as a damage and fire prevention measure. There's no point in having things plugged in that you don't need. What are you doing with your mail? It's a great time for fraudsters to raid your mailbox, intercept some invoices, give you bogus account information to send the bill to, and there you just lost out on whatever that balance was. Will they get caught? Possibly. Can you handle that kind of cash flow hit now? That's something to consider. Ideally, you have that mail going to some PO box with your trusted folks having access to that. Maybe the next step down is it's going directly to a trusted employee's residence. Another less safe, but still better than nothing. Have somebody go in daily and check the email or check the physical mail, and pick it up. There's a postal service app. You should get that and compare what you're receiving with what the post office says was delivered. Make sure that nothing's going missing, and then make sure it's not going missing on a day-to-day basis. Moving on to your IT gear, if you have servers or computers staying put, are they secured? Can somebody get in and install some kind of device to intercept electronic traffic? Can I steal a desktop that has all your personnel data on it? Again, great opportunities for somebody to perpetrate fraud. And while we're talking about personnel data, where are all your paper records? That locked filing cabinet, that might have been enough when your payroll person was coming in every day. There were generally eyes in that office. Now, nobody's coming in the office. Police response times are up just about all over the country. Certain crimes are of less priority, or certain calls, are less priority than others. So, heard the burglar sets off an alarm. I know I've got a lot more time in there than I used to have. I can get that file cabinet open. Now's the time to move those records off-site or consider something more robust like a formal safe. And then finally, we move into the remote staff. So if they're using a personal computer for work, you really don't have any control over virus protection or what kind of controls are in place to prevent cyber fraud. Your data can be stolen. You can be compromised. So you should really consider providing guidance on what work can be done on personal machines and personal devices, what work must be done on company machines, and you might even have to place some further restrictions depending on the type of business you're in. Another thing to be aware of is that when we're working at home, we're naturally more relaxed, and that translates into a more relaxed behavior online. Remind your people that they still have to maintain their cyber vigilance. Fraudsters are still active, and that poor Nigerian prince, he's still trying to give somebody $20,000 of his fortune if they would just give him that bank account number. Remind your staff to beware of attachments from unverified accounts. And last but certainly not least, and we're going to cover this in depth in the next session, CEO fraud, whaling, whatever the term you want to use is. In a virtual environment, face-to-face interactions, those have been replaced with text, emails, phone calls. So in the old days, the boss would come in, say, hand in an invoice and say, pay this bill today. That's now a virtual interaction. It's real easy to spoof an email address, make up a legitimate sounding message with a link that has a website with credit card entry. The best email filtering programs, they might catch it, but they're only about 90% efficient. And unless you're in the United States government, you don't have the best email filtering program at your disposal. And just for you statistics folks out there, there's literally over 1 billion fraud emails sent every day. Statistically, one of those is to end up in a staff member's inbox at least monthly. You have to train them not to open those things. So that really wraps it up, and we're going to go straight into Q&A. Check the questions and see what we have here. So we have one that says, as remote work is becoming more and more common for the foreseeable future, what are some best practices when onboarding new hires to ensure proper IT and operational needs are met, as well as integration and engagement with the team? So that's a pretty big question. So we'll do the onboarding and the IT stuff first. So the first step is to have policies and have guidance. So the things I alluded to earlier, what are you allowed to use on personal device, or what are you allowed to use a personal device for? What do you have to use the company machine for? What information can't be transmitted at all over certain systems? Develop those policies, develop those, and vet them, and then provide training on those policies is the first thing I would do. Next is if you don't have a cybersecurity expert on staff, there's any number of them that can be contracted with, and quite honestly, there's a bunch of free webinars available that'll cover some of the materials. So you can piece any of that together and use that as onboard training. And then as far as operational needs and the IT infrastructure, that's something that kind of goes beyond just a new hire. But you'll want to have somebody centralized configuring machines, whether that's a third-party vendor or if you have an in-house IT person. So you're going to want to have centralized control, remote administration enabled on those machines, and a preloaded set of software, and possibly even restrict what that user is allowed to load onto their machine and run. That having that type of lockdown, it decreases flexibility somewhat, but it provides a level of control that you might need and you might find meets your operational needs better. I hope that answered the question. If I didn't, please put anything in the Q&A that I might have missed. The next one we have that says, when we think of recovery and getting people back into offices, can you discuss that or speak more in depth as we get closer to getting back to normal? So recovery, there's a defined reintegration process, or there should be. There's certainly defined reintegration goals that you should set out ahead of time, because even though we kind of went to this telework environment, with a snap of a finger almost, going back to the office may not be, that fast, and I'd recommend it not be that fast. Just some general guidelines. First, you want to reestablish the office as a physical space. So going back in and making sure all the refrigerators work, making sure all your electronics that are there work fine. Check your heating and ventilation systems, make sure that's all functioning. Basically, make sure the office is habitable. So you have a small body of people that can go in and do that. And that way you're not dragging everybody else in and, spending, half a workday of people traveling in just to go right home. And you've lost a couple of cycles there. Moving on from that, you're also dependent on the way people's lives have been altered by this. So even if your office is inhabitable and you can get in there and you can do work and there's no restrictions on it, are the kids back in school? Or are parents still stuck home with them? That's got to be part of your equation as well. And then what transportation options are available? All of those types of things have to be planned in as you slowly return. I don't want to say return to normal. I want to say, return to a routine and reestablish a routine. We also have you can use this time, as I've mentioned in previous webinars, as a mechanism for implementing organizational change. So you can use this to almost spring forward as opposed to just returning to normal. Again, if I've failed to answer that, please put it in the chat and I'll happily address the rest of it. We have another one. And we still got about 10 minutes. I'll take any other questions you might have, but this looks like the last one for right now. Video conferencing security. Is it better to share sensitive information outside the conferencing software? Zoom seems to have had issues. Could that compromise information? So first, talking about the Zoom issues, that's not specifically the way I see it. I don't consider that an issue with the software as much as the people that are using it. So what you had with the Zoom bombing is people that shouldn't have been in a meeting. They've come in and they've disrupted the meeting somehow. That's basically because whoever had that URL, the link for that meeting has forwarded it out. So that blaming that on the software is like passing out keys to your house and then blaming the lock manufacturer when you get robbed. If you're not careful with your keys, if you're not careful with your Zoom meeting IDs, then people are going to get in. That being said, there are settings that Zoom is pushing now to kind of prevent that. One being you can set it up so that all individuals they come in muted, so they can't disrupt your meeting. There's a pretty detailed list of settings within the program that you can configure to make your space, your conferencing more secure. That being said, yeah, I wouldn't share sensitive information unless you can, actively monitor who's on that call or who's in that meeting and who's not. It's a very good time to practice need to know, and it's a very good time to practice discipline of where you're putting that information. So you probably wouldn't email somebody your credit card information. You probably wouldn't hold your credit card up to the camera on Zoom and show all your colleagues. You should probably treat your sensitive data with a similar amount of safeguarding. I hope that answered the question. Were there any others? I think my queue is clear unless I've missed something. No, that looks like it. The poll response, we've got almost a 50-50 split with single-threaded business functions. So the folks that are single-threaded, which is almost half of you, now is a good time to start not getting single-threaded on those things, to start cross-training. Hopefully, I've done a decent enough job explaining why that's important. If not, my email, my phone number, and the AE Works phone number, they're all displayed. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. If any questions come up that weren't addressed, please reach out to me. I'm happy to answer anything that you might have. And thank you again for joining us. Next week, we'll be going deep into CEO fraud and the various types of cyber fraud that are likely in this new environment and the new risks we face. Hopefully you'll join us then, and I hope everybody stays healthy and stays safe. Thank you for attending, and we're going to wrap up the webinar. Thank you. Goodbye.